a lot of feelings also.
Good.
For what's going on in the Middle East as well. I mean, you
Oh.
can't travel through a culture
Yeah.
without developing
Feeling for it.
feelings
Right.
for the people. Yeah.
Yeah, welcome. Welcome very much to Conversations, where it's a pleasure to welcome to the program Suzan Mazur. She's a journalist, and she's had a very checkered and interesting background in many parts of the world, and is a follower of human affairs in a very interesting way. And it's a great pleasure to welcome you here, Susan, to MNN 2 days after the President has delivered his State of the Union address, which in a sense is a State of the World address as well. So we'd want to talk about some of these issues, and welcome very much to Conversations.
Thank you, Harold. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it
and
is.
I think last time we spoke, it was about Kashmir, and
Yeah.
Kashmir is again in the news and in a much better light.
Yeah.
It
Okay,
seems.
good. Let's
the
hope.
news today was quite interesting that the border security forces were pulled from the Kashmir Valley.
Yeah, they're being put out on the border themselves.
And it's been a long time since we've seen that.
Yeah.
So it's things are afoot in,
Yeah.
in a positive way, which is
I hope you're right.
Yeah.
I hope you're right, because that certainly is one of the really hot spots in the world. And we both had an interest in the situation in Kashmir. You just sent me an interesting email about the situation in Baluchistan with Mr. Jawali and so forth. But I wonder, if before we get into this, and there's a huge tableau of issues that are before us all now. But maybe you could, since we have an hour, and this is in a sense grounded on your background, maybe share a little bit where you were born and raised, educated, some of those kind of things, and then maybe we could weave that into a tapestry of the world situation as we look at things on January 30th, the year 2003.
well, I was born in Newark at a time when you could go to the store as a child and get a popsicle and come home and safely.
Mm-hmm.
But things began to change a bit in Newark, and my parents got a bit anxious and decided to move to Pennsylvania.
Uh-huh.
And
To
so
rural or to...
I grew up in the valley on the other side of the Pocono Mountains,
Mhm.
northeastern Pennsylvania.
Yeah, okay.
It's an area that was basically very primitive in many ways. You know, the coal mines shut down,
Yeah.
and it was kind of had a sort of ghost-like quality to it, to the towns. But nevertheless, it was very safe. There were lots of hills to roam, and I had a very pleasant childhood.
Yeah.
Felt very secure.
You had sent me an email about somebody, was it Fitz or something, a woman that has a popsicle index where she's trying to measure how safe it is for a child to go to the corner on a scale of 1 to 100 or something,
Yeah,
and get back without having some sort of horrendous thing. Or
Catherine Austin Fitz,
Yeah.
who was a assistant secretary of housing in the first Bush administration, and then managing director at Dillon Reed, has is also, you know, somewhat nostalgic for the time when children could safely, you know, go to the store and come back in one piece. And she says that we need to, you know, get back to that. And without, she said, and she calls this the popsicle index.
Yes, you can get to the store, get a popsicle, and get home without any
She
trouble.
said the popsicle index at the moment is around 0.
Yeah, as
and,
opposed to, that would be absolutely unsafe.
Her
as opposed
dream
to
is
safe.
to see the popsicle index go back up to 100.
As it was.
And, yeah, as it was then in the 50s and 60s, and see the Dow Jones go up as well.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
in tandem.
It is interesting, the popsicle index. But you were there.
But she says basically that the reason why things are amiss is that there's a lot of drug money that's circulating in the economy, and compromising the political system. And you know, she quotes William Colby, the former director of the CIA, saying that it's possible that this narcotics money, organized crime money, is calling the shots at every level of government.
She thinks this is a
calling
possibility.
the
Colby
shots.
said this? Yeah,
Yes.
Colby has
William
insinuated
Colby,
that?
1995,
Really?
has said that.
Well, there's certainly huge. I know it's some people say $500 billion, maybe $1 trillion of narco money sloshing around, and you know, of course, the question could be, why is there such a demand, or what, and what's the way to address it, and that kind of thing.
She also says that excessive protection, too much homeland security, too much police, too much law enforcement is the part of the problem.
Oh, well, that's interesting, and certainly in the view of the homeland security and things that are going on now.
Because there's a regulation then of the borders, and that drugs can slip in and out, in a sort of orchestrated way. Anyway, it's a very uneasy thing to think about, particularly now that we've got a huge homeland security apparatus in place that people feel very uncomfortable about.
Yeah, and it seems to be getting more tight all the time.
We don't want more safety, we want more freedom.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. They want to, and then we've had this attack upon our being, with the attack on the Trade Center and so forth. So that's really shook up the consciousness and changed the whole political dynamic in this country to where security becomes to raise its head in a way that just wasn't even thought about before.
Yes, I mean, people are being...
It was unfathomable.
People are being fingerprinted going to a bank routinely in 45 states. People have signed on to a program called the Thumbprint Signature Program, which grew out of 1994, the Texas Banking Association, with the blessing of the FBI, that people, if they're non-account holders, have to leave a thumbprint at the bank. And under the current act, the Patriot Act, I mean, that thumbprint is not, can go anywhere. Can go right to the FBI. So, I mean, it's just not a very free feeling in the country under the circumstances. If you go to the website of the Texas Banking Association, it looks like, some sort of cattle brand. They've got a big thumbprint signature up on their website. And that, it's like branding cattle.
Yeah.
The ACLU has come down on this, and people are very, very uncomfortable. And there's no law in the books that can, I mean, if you're arrested, you're fingerprinted. But as a free citizen, this is something that is a very questionable practice that is just being allowed to run rampant through the culture.
And with Mr. Ashcroft now and the information office and the things they're doing in terms of tapping into wires, tapping into email records, tapping in, and in this quest for
it's not
security,
the way you strengthen America.
You do not think it is.
No.
Some people think that's the way to get security, so you can catch, in a criminal kind of sense, the bad guys that are making the trouble in the world. And that's one of the things, that's a theme that's probably largely abroad in the world now and behind much of both the domestic and foreign policy of the United States government.
Well, coercion doesn't work. I mean, it didn't work in Shah's Iran, it didn't work in Uganda, and it's just not going, it doesn't work.
You don't think coercion works? I used to try to explain that to my drill sergeant when I was in the Army, and I'd say, Mr. Sergeant, couldn't you understand if we could just sit down and have a talk over... But coercion does work, or it works in prisons.
Well, I think that's
and it works in institutions. We were talking, the military itself is based upon, some people have called it fascistic. It's a coercion, chain of command, clear ideas of what's in place. Also, the corporate structure of America very often, many people say, is similar in the sense you have a senior vice president, and all the troops, and everybody does what they're told because the situation is one where they're required to do that. And isn't that coercion, and isn't the whole society held together economically and otherwise by essentially a coercive system that requires people to do a certain thing in order to be able to have the right to have something to eat and a house to live in?
Yes.
Okay.
I absolutely
agree.
So
the whole system is coercive.
Yeah, and I think that, but the grassroots movement is for a non-hierarchical organization, and that is that's really taken root.
You think it is taking root?
Absolutely.
Certainly in the desire, and certainly in the, because I can remember
even with the anti-war protest, you go to an organization and to interview them, and there's a circle of people in charge, not just one, commander.
Oh, you mean they immediately get into a...
Yeah, there's a cooperation.
You get three people together.
It's a cooperative effort.
As soon as you get three people together, they form a bureaucracy. It seems. I don't know if there's a bureaucratic gene or something that they have to set up a bureaucracy.
But I also think that the hierarchical structure is viewed as being anti-woman.
Oh, that's interesting. You think that?
Yeah.
Well, would see things that way. You're a woman.
It's
and
patriarchal and anti-woman.
You think it's patriarchal.
Yeah.
There's something male or patriarchal in terms of the way the society is set up and the one we've inherited. And is that all over the world? All societies are that way?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I've traveled through about 50 countries, but I suppose that there are matriarchal systems in place, but
I don't think there
largely it's patriarchal.
I don't think there have been.
There are probably some small tribal
There were limits.
groups.
There were legends of Amazon and things, but I don't think there's been matrilineal, but I don't think there's ever been matriarchal. I don't think. I may be wrong, but
What in current history?
No, in all of history.
Oh no.
No, there aren't?
Turkey,
There's examples?
Anatolia, there was a matriarchal
Really?
society. Oh, they worshipped the mother goddess. The ancient societies were all matriarchal.
Okay, well then
They were.
that's a big theme. Then that would be
They
something.
worshipped Kybele, the goddess of fertility.
Okay, yeah, okay. Okay, that would be something that could be investigated. It's interesting, isn't it, how much we're able to get a root on the, or a link to
It's only modern
history.
that's patriarchal.
It's only in modern history since when? What brought that in?
I don't know exactly. Probably the Industrial Revolution or something.
You think only in the, what they...
This is not my area. I don't know.
Well, all right, Nebuchadnezzar and Egypt and that were pretty patriarchal. I mean, but anyway, that's another thing. But it's an interesting theme. It's a big and interesting theme. That idea of how you can see the society, but it certainly is becoming less secure. And the popsicle index is. I'm not sure if it's down to 100. I mean 0, as Ms. Fitz sees. And I said to you on the telephone, I don't feel that way when I go about. I don't know. I mean, I don't feel insecure just in my person at all, and I tend to trust people.
Well, New York is a very, despite what the bad press that New York gets in other parts of the world, I think Manhattan is it's a very safe place.
Seems that way to me. I mean,
you can move around. It's a very tolerant city.
Yeah.
It's
I like that they're so tolerant. One of the things
it's a fantastic city.
They used to have a thing about colonial benign neglect. I mean, one of the things that they'll benign neglect, you can be individualized or idiosyncratic, and people won't care. You're walking down the street in a clown costume. Well, there's another guy walking down the street in a clown.
It's the most tolerant city.
And there's a certain kind of
there's a freeness here.
Freeness and protection in that. But listen, your background. Now, we were talking about that, and there's a lot of things. And you brought in a couple of things. Your background. You went to school. You studied in that, and then you got involved in fashion and modeling and stuff.
Well, I think that we were going to really sort of talk about the Middle East today.
Oh,
and
okay, if you want.
And a lot of my work as a journalist, which has been the bulk of my career, has focused on the Middle East.
Middle East, okay.
On the Middle East. And I wanted to, I brought a photograph actually from my very first trip into the Middle East.
Okay. That would be this one?
In 1976.
Should I hold it up and let the people see it now?
Sure.
Then? And let's see if we can come in.
This is Richard Helms, who was the ambassador to Iran in 1976. He had been the director of the CIA, and he had just recently come to Iran. And
did you take this picture? Or
no, I didn't. But the reason why I have this photograph is that I was there at the same time.
This would have been 1976, our centennial.
1976 in April.
April 76 in Tehran.
Right.
Iran. Okay.
I was part of and he was dancing up a storm at a gala reception that the Shah sponsored.
Yeah.
At the Tehran Hilton.
And the point of this photograph is what?
Here it is. Here's actually the program, the inaugural of the Bicentennial Festival, celebrating American culinary heritage for the benefit of the Children's Convalescence Home in cooperation with the International Women's Club, in the presence of His Excellency the Ambassador of the United States, and this was at the Royal Tehran Hilton.
This was the event at which Mr. Helms was dancing?
Yes.
Okay, and what's the point of this?
I was a model at that time.
You were at this event?
I was a New York top New York runway fashion model, and I was.
Oh, you were. Okay.
I went to Tehran.
I put this down now.
Yeah.
Okay.
With as part of a group.
And is this a photograph of
that's
you
a
at the
photograph
time?
Of me at the time.
This is you as a fashion model?
I was actually the bride of the show.
And this is the same show that he was at?
Wearing a Koos van den Akker and about $150,000 worth of onyx and topaz from David Webb.
What's a Kuz Kamparani?
This was in Tehran.
Yeah, but what's a Kuz Kamparani?
No. Kuz van den Akker.
What does a Kuz van den Akker mean?
He's a designer.
Oh, I'm sorry.
He
Okay, I'm not very up on that. Go ahead.
So I actually, was very interested in going on this trip because I had been
This would have been 1976 again.
1976.
Okay.
I was very interested in going on this fashion trip because I had previously been a writer for the Hearst magazines for a few years and dropped out because dropped out of journalism because my environment column had been canceled under pressure from the gun lobby.
Oh, really?
So I became a fashion model.
You
and
had studied.
I was very intrigued by developments in the Middle East, and I thought, it might be. It was a good thing to do.
Yeah, okay.
So
and you had studied English and that and writing, and you'd done writing for newspapers, journalism, column writing,
I went
news reporting?
into journalism right out of college.
You did, okay, right.
Yeah.
And then you
Background
got
in English and education.
Then the opportunity came up, you got a chance to become a high-level fashion model, which would be a very exciting and interesting thing to do. Yeah.
Yes, and so I found myself right there in the
Tehran.
epicenter as the Middle East was unfolding, the whole in the 1970s, and so we were in Iran, and I thought it was particularly interesting that Helms was there.
Why?
Because it was at a time when we were trying to nurture the Shah.
Yes, we were giving 100%
We were trying,
behind
not only
him.
we, but the Germans, many people were trying to really sell the Western package, and this bicentennial celebration we were part of the package.
Yeah, and the Shah was set upon a modernization program that we hear Thomas Friedman talk about, that the Arab world and the world in general needs to get with the program and modernize and democratize.
Yes, to modernize the Iranians.
The Lexus, rather than being concerned with the olive trees of tradition.
And we were on television in Iran,
the models?
wearing Pauline Trégère and all these jewels. But right across the street from the hotel where I was staying, the children were in the mud washing dishes with a hose. I mean, there was that kind of disconnect between, a small group of people who had money, who could buy these dresses and these jewels, and who, and then the people who were just across the street who had nothing.
Yeah, but isn't that a metaphor for the world?
So my feeling is that this push into Iran and this push into Iraq that we're intending at the moment.
Now you're bringing up, okay, yeah.
There's just a very strong parallel.
Okay. You mean a parallel between what we were doing with the Shah, and we had overthrown Mossadegh.
Yeah, 3 years after this gala event, the Shah was overthrown.
3 years after this, the Khomeini came, and we might go back to, was it 54 that Mossadegh was overthrown by the CIA in Iran? A democratic government was overthrown by America so that the forces of the Shah could be installed with the Savak and so forth, and then there was a reaction against that. And is that a saying that there is an arrogance or a hubris on the part of the leaders of the Western industrial corporate world in terms of trying to force our values upon other cultures?
Prince Saud al-Faisal has said, that cultures have to evolve. You can't impose democracy on people. I mean, people have to arrive at a democratic system on their own, at their own pace. You can't throw a fist into the equation and expect for things to evolve.
A fist? You mean like coercion, like you said before? Yeah,
the military.
Or the military being military power.
Military occupation is not going to inspire democracy.
Well, we had the British Raj, didn't we? And I mean, that was done with grape shot or with, military power. They extended themselves, sea power and so forth, and there's been a great deal of the extension of, they said Britain rules the waves in the 19th century. Cecil Rhodes was openly just of the mind that the British were the superior people, and it was their God-given responsibility to make everyone in the world a Britisher, because we were obviously superior people, particularly vis-a-vis the colonial people they were conquering, and they did that with power. And power itself has been largely I mean, it's a little bit idealistic to think we live in a world where you don't have power relationships between economic and political interests. You understand?
I think that these cultures in the Middle East do want to modernize. There's no question about that. But I just think that the democratization, the so-called democratization, takes time. It has to come from within. I mean, for instance, look at this photograph.
Here's another thing. What do you want to show?
From 1984, when I was in Saudi Arabia.
This one? Okay.
I was invited by the Scientific Institute to research a documentary. I headed the production team.
This was a video project? This was a television project?
Yeah. I mean, they were, it was my first time in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, I didn't
What year are we in now?
Wear a veil or anything. I mean, I just, conducted myself as a businesswoman. And
what year are we now?
This was 1984.
Okay.
I'm standing in front of a solar telephone booth.
Okay.
So, I mean, the Saudis are very interested. They were very interested in solar energy at the time. If the plug had not been pulled by the Reagan administration on solar energy, there might have been more of a continuity with the solar program in Saudi Arabia.
That was a telephone system that could be operated by solar power?
Yeah.
Makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely a push toward modernization in Saudi Arabia, and that will continue. And I think that that's true within the entire, Middle East.
That's interesting.
But it's something that is not going to be forced on people with positive results. I mean, the results that you get are sort of this.
What is this? You got another picture.
As you have in Colombia.
Now, you spent time in Colombia. You did You did a journalistic project there, or what were you involved in Colombia, if I may?
In Colombia, I made 3 trips into Colombia in the late 80s and early 90s. For working with a variety of news organizations.
That's you with the 2 young ladies?
This was at the M19 guerrilla camp. But, when the people are left to their own means because the elite in the society won't let them in or won't let them share in the wealth, you get a guerrilla operation. And the M19 has since disarmed and disbanded.
That's not part of the FARC.
They're not part of FARC, no. But located in they were located in southern Colombia, right at the base of the Andes.
Oh, southern, down toward Uruguay.
So I think that what you're going to get is forcing people to modernize, forcing democratization on cultures. You're going to get a splintering and more violence, without a doubt.
It's a big word, democracy. It's a very, very big word, and I'm not sure if we give enough because people will take a word, or that's one of the things we might want to talk about, is the manipulation of the public mind that is done through public relations or political manipulation of public thinking. But democracy is a big word, and it means different things to different people in different ways. For instance, I had a person here a couple of weeks ago. They said the most democratic people, in fact, the man who aired last week is from Israel. And he said he thought the most democratic people that he had ever dealt with in his life were the Bedouin of the Negev. They're very democratic. The tribal structure, which there's a very democratic thing that goes on there and everything. The country of Libya, where I have been, did an interview with Mr. Gaddafi and so forth, it calls themselves the Jamahiriya. They say, they claim, interestingly enough, and it's interesting because Richard Pearl, I saw him on television the other day saying, after we've handily pacified Iraq and everything's fine there, who are we going to invade next in order to bring real democracy, such as we see it, to? And he mused, he thought, well, it looks like maybe Libya. But in Libya, they have a thing where they've said that there was a tradition of monarchy, and that what coheres a society? You had dynastic followings throughout, so we had all the kings and queens of dynastic feudal Europe and so forth. Then there came in 1776 in the United States a revolution that created a representative democracy. That had feedback into Europe, and he said we had monarchy, then we had representative democracy, such as we have here. We have a Congress, and we vote people into the Congress, and we have a president, and we have a system. It's a representative democracy. And during the 1992 convention, they had Mr. Perot running. And a lot of people said that's really interesting because they were talking about town meetings and trying to get toward, and it seems to me a theme, Porto Alegre and other places, a big, large theme, is this idea of participatory democracy where the people are involved. And in Libya, they have participatory, and he said, In Arabic, they have a word, jamahura, which is a republic. That's what we have, and that's what the United States is saying is the basis of what they call modernization. We have a system where you have parties and that sort of thing. And there they have meeting halls where people meet, in the case of Libya, and it's a jamahariya. It's a step beyond what we have inherited from history. So
Well,
that as the United States appeared to the Louis XVI court, that represented an ancient regime, old-fashioned principles of organization, so the United States might represent to much of the world that is looking for real participatory democracy. We might be nothing more than in a certain sense, an ancient regime to the minds of many people, and we're going to try and force our ideas of a system that we are vested in and psychologically vested in upon all the world, to our great dismay, possibly.
I think it's very interesting that the New York Times finally got around to profiling Gaddafi and in some kind of positive light on the cover story a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, it's a lot of disinformation been used, yeah.
The system that
well, that's a case of him, but it applies to others too, and I think it has.
But I think that's heartening in a way that there's beginning to examine, because they have no other choice. The media has no other choice but to begin to examine what makes these societies tick. It's really important because it's disturbing what the root of the policy, the current policy in Washington is regarding the Middle East. I mean, it seems to have grown out of a small group of people who were advisors to Netanyahu and Sharon. I mean, Richard Pearl, David Faith, and others who were
Wolfowitz,
who wrote a policy back in 1996, I believe, which is what we're doing right now. It's to make Israel powerful, vibrant economy, and at the expense of the Arabs by rolling back Syria. And by, pulling Turkey and Jordan into this by however we're doing it.
Yeah.
And it's very disturbing because there's a certain false pretense to it, because what it hinges on is there seems to be this convergence on the issue of the ancient Israelites. The ancient Israelites.
I haven't thought much about it, but if I may, I'm going. You pick it right up, but that doesn't go back to '96. It goes back to about 1970. That the group that you called the neocons, who are now more or less represented by Mr. Bush and the hard right market fundamentalists that are running the world in a very real sense and taking it in a certain direction, included Sharon and Netanyahu and Wolfowitz and that sort of thing. And they were a voice in the wilderness, and they got powerful after Mr. Reagan was invented, and now they've come back with a vengeance. And they just had an article comparing Mr. Bush to Reagan. He's not the son of his father, he's the son of Reagan, and it'll be Reagan Plus that's going to be installed. And the tie with the Sharon and hard right in Israel have been part of that right along.
Well, I find this particularly fascinating because I did a series of stories, a cover story and a couple of follow-ups for the Financial Times and other publications on the FLDS, the Fundamentalist Latter-day Saints.
What in the world is the FDLS? I mean, the Fundamentalist.
They're fundamentalist Mormons, basically.
Fundamentalist Mormons.
They're Mormons who broke away from the main Mormon Church. They still practice polygamy. Now, the tie-in to the ancient Israelites is this: the Mormons feel that there will be a reuniting of the 10 tribes of Israel in the Rocky Mountains.
In the Rocky Mountains.
Yes, this is what they believe, and they have.
This is core to the mainline Mormon Latter-day Saints.
They believe this
theology.
So that's, and going back in history to the British Empire.
Yeah.
At about 1700, there was this the British Israelite movement arose in the British Isles. People began to think that they were blood descendants of the ancient tribes of Israel. Not only the people in the British Isles, but people in the British Empire and the former colonies, which would include America.
Mm-hmm.
And this was something that was just dreamt up, you know,
Mm-hmm.
by a bunch of eccentrics.
Mm-hmm.
But it caught fire as a result of Napoleon's exploitation of Egypt.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There was a whole romance with Oriental literature and
Yeah.
everything, and this concoction came, you know,
Mhm.
was arrived at. You know,
Mhm.
there's no base to it.
No.
And there's a fellow by the name of Tudor Parfit
Mm-hmm.
who has been researching the lost tribes of Israel, has a book out by that name right now.
The Lost Tribes of Israel?
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's been doing genetic testing with his
That's
partner
great. You
Neil
can start-
Bradford
Mhm.
from Oxford,
Mhm.
testing of the Lemba tribe and
That's in
some,
Africa. That's in Mozambique.
some
or
people in
something.
South Asia, where he found some valid links, but he said it's innately bizarre,
Well, let's say the cone.
innately bizarre
Mm-hmm. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
that whole swaths of the population in Britain
Mhm.
and in America and you know Mormons
Mm-hmm.
have any kind of
Connection to the
connection
ancient
to
ten
the ancient
tribes.
tribe. It's just baloney.
Well, okay, yeah.
And he says that what this is
Yeah.
basically a manipulation of the population for political gain.
I would think so. That's been going on ever since Nebuchadnezzar, I think. You know?
Now, the Mormons say that, according to the Book of Mormon, which most people question as being valid.
Well, the Mormons don't. I mean,
The Mormons,
he had
the
those
Mormons
stones.
don't, but
It was
everyone
Smith,
else
right?
does.
Upstate New York.
Yeah,
And he had the stones and let him read it.
yeah, and what?
And that is an extremely powerful and very quickly growing and
Well,
very
in the Book of
prosperous
Mormon,
group of
in the Book of-
Americans.
In the Book of Mormon, they say that he talks about it talks about ancient Israelites arriving in South America,
I remember that.
someplace
Something
in
like
Guatemala area,
Well, that
southern
might have been
southern
the
Mexico,
Phoenicians,
northern Guatemala, and that these ancient Israelites. There are two schools on this. One say they became
the American
the Indians.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Became by some miracle.
Yeah.
And the other say, you know, there's blood descendants,
Mm-hmm.
and there has been, you know, push for genetic testing.
Yeah.
Now, Bradford and Parfit say this is just ridiculous because, I mean, it's known that the American Indians came 10,000 years ago
Did you see that thing the other day about the
from
journey of man?
Siberia.
Yeah, they came across
So,
it.
I mean-
as few as maybe 10 made that journey across
It's all
Thuringia.
it's all very well to have your religious beliefs and so on, but when there's a political manipulation going on, which is what people feel is going on here,
Mm-hmm.
it's for the mind control of a population
Of course.
for
yeah.
political purposes and to make war on other people,
To protect certain material and political and economic interests.
to use this block of votes
Mhm.
to promote you know some sort of war is an outrage. These are crimes against humanity, and in fact in France the Mormons cannot do any commercial activity. They're banned from any commercial activity.
By law?
It's not considered a cult, but it's you know borderline. It's a very uncomfortable situation. You know, this use even today in the Senate hearings, Armitage was referring to Isaiah in his delivery. This is a clear manipulation of the American people.
But haven't the politicians done this and manipulated people all along from whenever? It's all mind control that goes on all the time. And it's now with television and with this kind of... And look at what's going on with the buildup of the propaganda and the buildup and the mind control and the use of not good evidence at all, but just misty evidence and all this kind of thing, and prejudice and fear that's going on about
And
the war
despite
that is now going to be launched on
and
Iraq,
there-
and it seems to be growing like some sort of a tragedy with
and
the Greek chorus not
there's a
able to do
huge
anything about
anti-war
it.
movement, and Barbara Boxer at the
But will it
same
come to
hearing,
nothing? Yeah.
at the same hearing, Barbara Boxer, the senator from California, whose people are very anti-war, is saying, when we go into Iraq, the American people will be with us. I mean, this is just absurd.
Well, it has, and they voted in the Senate, and they voted in the Senate, and so, I mean, that is...
If anything, I mean, there's going to be a really serious anti-war movement in this country, and basically the Congress is moving completely out of step with the American people.
You think so? You think that if that's the case, you think they are, that they're in league with the elite who are going to make a power play or something of that sort? I suppose there must have been something like this in Germany in 1935, 36, 37 or something, before the Anschluss and that sort of thing. There was a building of military power and capability to expand outward and so forth, and that's happening here. But he's still popular. And what about the people who say, well, we'll just do this quickly?
Where is he popular? I mean, what polls are they looking to?
Oh, let's say he's popular enough to where he's pulling it off. He's getting away with it. He got the election. He's got all these things that are doing in terms of the domestic program now, which are very worrying, with the information office and all that sort of thing, Patriot Act, all these kind of things. It's growing. Fear. People are fearful. The United States is fearful physically for themselves. We haven't been. We're fearful. So when people are fearful, they want a strong caudillo or a leader that's going to make them safe again to get back to your 100% popsicle rating. And nobody's going to come and get, and we're going to go out and get those bad guys. And there are bad guys that are easily identifiable, and they happen to be Arabs.
Well,
or they happen to be Muslims, or they've got a group, you know.
People feel a great repression in our country at the moment, and this can only backfire.
You think?
It didn't work in the Shah's Iran. It didn't work in Uganda. It is not going to work, certainly, in the United States of America.
It didn't work in Shah's Iran. It didn't work in, well, we took up, what was it, when the United States had their revolution.
Even the mainstream media has been bought off. I mean, if you want to go to valid information...
Well, that's an indication of the degree to which he's been able to exert power and mind control over the population. And well, it's going, and the television channel, and the drumbeat is coming to where they're going to do this thing. I wonder if there's something like that before Napoleon marched off to Moscow.
The point is, nobody believes the mainstream media anymore.
No, that isn't true. There must be a number.
They don't believe it, and so they're going to alternative sources.
Okay, that's interesting.
And nobody's buying these newspapers anymore. So their advertising rates are, they're losing advertising. They're selling, giving shirts for subscriptions. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's so people are going to the alternative media.
You think they are?
Yes.
You don't think you're just maybe, okay, that's an interesting thing. The alternative media, and we have an alternative media now with this incredible internet that has come. What an amazing thing where you can get alternative sites, you can have access to press from around the world and that sort of thing. And the world is going to see this differently than we do. They just had a piece in the New York Times today where they had an article the way this is going to be seen in Egypt, and the way it's going to be seen in Mexico and so on. It's not going to be seen the way Mr. Bush is portraying it, that we're going to go over there and the people are going to greet us as liberators and all that sort of thing. There's going to be reaction against us as representing the traditional colonial attitude of the Europeans toward the rest of the world.
It can't work. I mean,
these
people have a civilization. They have traditional families.
Iraq goes back a few thousand years to
They have a rich archaeology and antiquity.
It's a cradle of civilization.
I mean, America right now, the traditional families in America are something like 20%.
Yeah.
Despite all the family values that are talked about, we have a dwindling traditional situation in America.
Makes us all the more vulnerable then, maybe, because our institutions and identity sources are not very firm. So we're unstable, and so we're open to the pleas of the demagogue.
I think the problem is that these institutions are coming down. I mean, they're crumbling, but instead of...
Which institution?
The mainstream media, and many institutions are sort of, losing their oomph. And
you think they're losing their oomph?
Yeah, and so therefore but instead of supporting, nurturing what is growing out of that, the alternative media, for instance, instead of nurturing that. The authorities get very, very nervous and want to sort of prop up the old way.
Yes, and they're doing it.
Which can never work.
Well, who can say it never works? It has worked.
Well, I mean, you can
recreate... said you can fool all the people all the time and all the people, and so Mr. Lincoln said and everything. Or,
you can recreate Aphrodisias, but it's not the same old Aphrodisias. Well, Aphrodisias is an ancient city in Turkey. but which they've sort of rebuilt over a 25-year period from the ruins. They sort of made a new Aphrodisias.
Okay, you can rebuild it. You can do that. Yeah.
It's like recreating
do you
Euphronius crater from a fragment.
But
you get the flavor. But I mean, basically, it's something that has been modernized, but it doesn't have the vibrancy of the real thing. Whereas the alternative media is the real thing.
You think? Well, that's your view, and that's probably the way the people who in France were listening to the words of Jefferson, and they probably would have viewed what in the world is going on. The powdered wigs at Versailles would have looked and said, "My word, what are these people talking about? That we need something different than this system over which we rule now." I think much of the world sees the United States that way. But the powdered wigs in Versailles did not see themselves that way. They saw themselves as representing hundreds of years old tradition that kept a society together that was being under challenge by a bunch of riffraff.
Well, I think
the people in those positions of power over the networks or over the corporations or the military or political process and so forth see the people as riffraff. And they are to people to be ignored. And the internet and your alternate systems and so forth is just irresponsibility. They just don't really understand. And they don't have a need to know. We know, do what you're told, get back on the assembly line, do what you're told, raise the flag, and do what you're told. And that's the way they see it.
Well, I think another point also is that the current system is very anti-woman. I mean, women have almost no representation in Congress. I mean, what kind of representative government is that? I mean, this is not a representative government of the people. Women are, from a socio-biological perspective, more peace-oriented.
You think so? That's an interesting thing. That gets back to the ideas of human nature.
Groups who are
I think there might be something to be said for that, yeah.
And if we had more women in Congress, if we had a 50-50 Congress, we wouldn't be going to war.
You think not?
No.
That's interesting. That's an interesting perspective, You're a woman, and so you see things that way, so that your kind should be more...
Germaine Greer
she's
wrote
great.
a fascinating piece where she sort of described the hopelessness of the situation as she said that it all had to do with the germ count.
Germ count.
That it had to do with because men the sperm count is much higher.
Millions.
Yes, and a woman has one.
But one.
Yeah. So that she said that it inspires men to kill one another. Sort of reenacting the primal, sort of the primal act.
Well, that's an interesting way. That's an interesting way to set up the whole dialectic of evolution.
She said that things won't change until the germ count is even. One sperm to one egg.
Well, one little sperm wouldn't have a chance with all that barrage of stuff to set up against it. But anyway, that's one way to set up the whole dialectic of the evolution. Because
there's also a very, if I could just interrupt a second,
Sure.
There's also a very brilliant artist named Nikki de Saint-Phal who died recently, a sculptress and filmmaker, and she collaborated with her partner, this sculptor Jacques. Don't recall his last name, but they did a film on war, and where they painted all the cannons pink. They were all these phalluses in the field.
That'd be funny. That's clever. Art can do this, and people can. It would be satire and mockery.
It was wonderful. It's
great.
Perfectly what it is. I mean, it's just it's a very primal urge, and women are sick of it.
Well, perhaps so. I don't know. I mean, if you really get serious about trying to understand what in the world's going on, you begin. And isn't this an interesting time to be alive? That we're coming to understand so much now, and that we're all in a situation where there's an evolution of consciousness. Apparently, in this part of the universe, we have an evolution of consciousness, and it's part of a universe. We understand now the creation of the universe, and there are probably represented in that male and female elements in terms of the evolution of you have Shiva, you have Ram, you have all these different kinds of things that are represented in the mythologies and so forth. But we understand we have these two principles, and we're now coming to a part. Are we coming to a point where there will be some sort of a synthesis, or are we coming to a point of major change? You're saying you said the United States and maybe the Western adventure. The Western civilization, Spencer used to talk about its downfall, others have as well, but that has gone as far, and that it's a major change is coming, and that's signaling a major change in terms of the evolution of the whole Megillah, as they say.
Yes, I think
we've reached
viewed,
a point. Let me just make one point. That we've reached a point now with the weapons of destruction, with these pink cannons. They're not pink anymore; they're olive green and so forth. But they have a weapons capability that we've now reached after 200,000 years of evolution. This species, where if they're unleashed, the weapons of destruction, we now know they can destroy the whole species and a good deal of the top end of what we think of as the biological process. That's something new in terms of, we couldn't do that even in the Second World War. We can do that now. We can destroy it. And at the behest of one person, Mr. Reagan, or Mr. Bush in this case, could do something that would set off a chain reaction, or even somebody else now, maybe Mr. Pakistan.
And at the same time, the
and
world,
that signals something in the evolution of consciousness.
There's a uniting of the anti-war forces all around the globe, and there's going to be a big protest at the UN coming up on the 15th, I believe, of the world against war.
Well, I think you're going a little bit far.
Well, but the thing is that
Do you think the war is going to happen? No matter what we do, the fix is in? Do you ever get that sense about the world, the way the society
I'm not so
is set
sure.
up?
I mean, China is very upset about the build-up in the region, in the Gulf.
Well,
and China has interest in Pakistan, for instance.
That's true.
They have interest in the Baluchistan area, where also the United States has a 30% interest in the oil.
Yeah, I know that fellow, that Jamali, just made prime minister in India. I did a program with him about 10 years ago.
And that's a tricky situation.
Pakistan.
I mean,
Pakistan's very
so
touchy.
they're watching out for their interest in that region. And another thing is that the Iranians in that region, the Iranians have sort of been making agreements, trade agreements, and other agreements with India regarding access to, regarding the oil situation in the area and projects in Afghanistan, and because Pakistan is, so close to the United States right now, India is trying to find partners in the region.
Whom? Well, who is India going to find?
Iran.
Interesting. That's an interesting. Yeah.
So that whole area right now of southern of Pakistan, the Baluchistan area, which borders on the Iranian side.
That's
as
right,
well,
in Afghanistan. Yeah.
Is an area that's very tricky.
It sure is.
So the Chinese are concerned, and what have we heard from China? I mean, what are they saying?
Yes.
Aside from their concern, I mean, will they put their foot down? I mean.
Saw Mark Shields the other day say on one of the public television say something about this litany of things against Iraq. He said, why don't they say those things about China? Well, China has a whole bunch of nuclear weapons. So now there's also Korea.
So
seems to be
Israel.
The lesson is, and Israel.
Israel has 300 hydrogen bombs.
Yeah, but they are thought of as being. I don't know where you got that.
Dr. Helen Caldicott, who's the head of the physicians for social responsibility.
I've done programs, but I know that she's really good.
She said in an interview with Guerrilla News Network that the Israelis have 300 hydrogen bombs.
Did she have documentation of that?
I was told by someone in the military that they'll get more when they use those.
Yeah, well, the 300. Well, that would need documentation for that. But that they have nuclear weapons. But I don't know hydrogen. I don't know whether that.
That's what
but
she
certainly
said.
They have, and so it's assumed on the part.
You can read it on the website of Guerrilla News Network.
Well, that would be what I would want from the Guerrilla News Network is documentation. Because
it was an
that's
interview
one of
with
the
her.
things. Okay, and she can say that, but her documentation. So what you want from these things, that's one of the things. The Internet is great, but anyone can put anybody they want on there, and it doesn't. That's why people who are in the establishment say.
She has a group of physicians for social responsibility.
I know, that's great.
I can't imagine she would say that if it didn't have some merit.
Well, I thank you for that. I can go and I can look it up, but I will go to the source because there are some people say they have none. And that sort of thing. So the question is that you can get information, allegations, and so forth, but to get the source. But the point is, that's part of that arsenal that we have collectively among ourselves, the 6 billion human beings, that if it is unleashed, and it's unleashed from China, it's unleashed from the United, and don't forget the United States has an incredible array of all kinds of weapons that they build and do all the time, and they're saying other people can't, because other people are somehow, what? Other people are irresponsible, Other people are not seeing the world the way they're supposed to see it, the way we do. We are responsible. Let's see, who is responsible? United States, Israel's responsible, England, France, some of these people. But then you've got all these people who are not responsible. That is, they don't see things the way we do. They don't listen to the same drummer that we march to. And that they're beginning to develop a capability to have a real military threat against us, who really are, if you understand it, they're betters.
Who are you referring to?
Well, there's North Korea, there's Pakistan, there's other places where there could be a proliferation of the... I even saw a thing where Argentina and Brazil are going to feel that there is a person in the government in Brazil said they're going to have to develop atomic weapons against Argentina, where you have a meltdown of economics.
Well,
so there could be a proliferation.
I think we have to lead by example and disarm ourselves.
Well, they're not doing that.
The United States.
The United States is not doing that.
Has to lead by example.
Yeah, but the United States...
Not with a fist.
But the United States is leading by the fist now,
well,
obviously.
It's a mistake.
You think it's a mistake, a serious mistake. And you also think that that is against world public opinion?
It's a failure. Leading with a fist is a failure of policy, of diplomacy.
Okay, Realpolitik has said all along that it matters how many guns you have and how much you can enforce your will upon others, and that's been the basis of international relations, and you can assert your own interests and all that.
And there's
and
also
that's
something even more frightening, and that is that, this thirst for oil, which is being used, which will be used to they don't care that much about the heating situation in America. It's more for the fuel for planes that can then so that we can have more bases around the world and make even more of a mess, more hostility.
But they don't see themselves as making a mess. Cecil Rhodes didn't see himself as...
The military has to be scaled back tremendously.
Well, that's your opinion.
It's
now, the people
not mine alone.
The people at the Pentagon don't think that, and
Mr.
Bush doesn't think that, and much of the they just used a huge develop. They're going to cut back on all the social programs. All the governments of state and city are in deficit, so social programs to help aid to dependent children.
That's why we need a representative democracy in America.
We have to get to a representative democracy.
Yeah,
you don't think we're going to ever be able to get to a participatory one?
What's going on in Washington does not represent the people.
You feel that. Okay, now if that is the case and it gets to a certain point, now that none of the governments have represented in a certain sense. It's been a trade-off against what's been possible. And whether or not the future offers something, the adverse side of this destructive scenario, I mean, if you think of it philosophically, we can destroy ourselves. Couldn't do that in the past with spear points and arrows and clubs. Now we can do that. So there's something new blowing in the wind, as Bobby Dylan used to say, and our leadership of the world is not picking up on the promise of what that new is. You don't see it. It's needed. But the people of the world perhaps sense that or feel it, as you say, around the world and even in this country, so that the system that's in place has to be questioned in a fundamental way.
Yes, the government is not confident.
Okay.
The people want to evolve.
Mm-hmm.
The government is afraid. They're afraid of, and this is not a healthy situation.
The people want to evolve to something new, something that would be peaceful, something that would be having some of the nurturing values of
and the government is afraid of this.
Yes.
It doesn't trust the people.
The people, that's correct. You feel that. In the United States, have they ever trusted the people?
I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
In my lifetime, it certainly was much better.
Mm-hmm.
We had Kennedy, who was very inspiring.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I do.
But he did the Bay of Pigs. He did the Bay of Pigs.
But I do remember life being sweeter in my lifetime.
Yeah, but
the political climate was. There was
so you think
a healthier
it's particularly
situation.
bad now? Yeah, I'm trying to measure it against 200,000 years of human existence, and that we're getting to a point. It's like a pregnancy. You're gestating for 9 months, a human gestation. I don't know, 20 months for an elephant. I don't know how long for a frog. But anyway, there's a gestation, and then there's a change, a major change. As there was a major change of consciousness from Australopithecine, and that great program we just alluded to, that Journey of Man, where they got the DNA for a template of the whole evolution. Right. So that there is an opportunity that is just bursting in terms of a new capability that we have, maybe to provide for everybody in a non-scarcity way, the whole planet. We can take care of everybody now, so that all the systems by which we have to enforce zero-sum wind and power and all that sort of thing is outdated, and the people are stuck like that, like an ancient regime, to the old-fashioned systems and don't realize or have a vision of the potentiality. And the people may have to take the leaders there.
That is
through
exactly,
consciousness raising.
That's exactly what I think will happen. Barbara Boxer has said that there's going to be, the American people will follow, you know, Bush into war, but I think that there will be a huge, huge anti-war protest that will...
Anti-American.
It's going to be staggering what's going to happen.
You think so? Yeah.
I mean, these are not... Someone sent me an email saying, pray for our boys. I said, which ones are our boys?
Yeah, right, okay. Yeah, well, you're thinking
we're all in this together. We're internationalists now. We're no longer nationalists.
A lot of people are nationalists, and they think
we're
of their own...
humanists. We have to think in a global way now. We're connected by the internet. We're
and by the realities of the evolution.
And we're making war on the earth.
Okay, well, those are all very interesting things. I know that that'll be fought out politically and so forth within the structure of the world, the realpolitik and all that sort of thing. But I know that they may have to be brought up. Sure, those fellows attacked us, and it just got our dander up, as they say. We're going to go back and get them in a vengeance kind of way, like we've been doing Hatfields and McCoys over the years. But it should have been a wake-up call that this is a whole connected world.
Yes, and there's so many loose threads about what exactly happened in 9/11.
Yeah, that's another thing. But the point is, it didn't waken us to the idea that we have to be sensitive to other people. It just made us intransigent about how correct we are against these people that are evil. The same old thing that's going. Ran out of time. We could go on talking forever.
Harold, thank you.
It's
so
really
much
a pleasure. We didn't
me.
get to show your thing, but this is a 7 Brides for 1 Brother, a thing for the Financial
We
Times.
did cover that, actually.
Yeah, we did. Okay. It's your pleasure. Sorry we're running out of time, but it was really interesting. We just got started. And your
Let's
pleasure.
pray for peace, huh?
Yeah, pray for peace and for change. And Francis Boyle, he's got a thing going. God bless him. We were supposed to talk to him today to lay the predicate for impeaching the President of the United States, George W. Bush, for having violated the
only problem is then you get left with
States.
Cheney.
Well, okay, but we're or whatever.
There are a few people who are
it doesn't make sense now, but it may. But people are beginning the groundwork for a giant swell against, and particularly the results of what is being enacted now.
Yeah, the human spirit will triumph.
Okay, let's hope. Let's hope, because it's touch and go, and it's touching. It's anyway. Your pleasure to have the perceptions of Suzan Mazur, a journalist, and you can see a thinker of great importance. And we welcome you. We invite you to tune in. We'll come back again next week. That's it for this particular program. Suzanne, thanks again for coming in and for everything. Until next time. So, I think that idea. See that you can't get the political thing to get. They had. Ken Starr got $40 million to try and find out about Mr. Bush doing something sexually, something in an office of and they brought impeachment on that. That's the level of ridiculousness. Yeah. But when this other thing is happening, if there's
and it's so difficult to move. But I think Senator Kennedy is being very, very outspoken now. Something could happen.